I am Ember Sterling, a 27-year-old structural engineer living in Chicago. I stood in the shadows of the Chicago penthouse, gripping my glass of water until my knuckles turned white. The room was full of expensive suits and the smell of expensive perfume. My brother, Adrian, stood in the center, glowing under the chandelier. He raised his champagne glass for a toast. The room went quiet. I thought, for just 1 second, he might actually thank me. I thought he might acknowledge that I was the one who drew the plans, fixed the safety issues, and saved this project. Instead, he looked right at me with a smirk. "And let's not forget my little sister, Ember," he announced, his voice booming so everyone could hear. "Maybe after this success, she'll finally get inspired to find a real job." The laughter wasn't a ripple, it was a wave. My mother covered her mouth to hide her smile. My father shook his head, looking at me like I was a stain on the carpet. They thought I was weak. They thought I was just the uneducated sister who lived in trailers. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that I wasn't just the invisible help. I was the architect of everything they owned. And soon, I would be the architect of their collapse. But before I tell you how everything flipped like and subscribe, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? I am Ember Sterling, a 27-year-old. I walked out of that penthouse and didn't wait for the elevator. I took the stairs. I needed to feel my feet hitting the concrete steps. I needed to feel the burn in my legs to remind myself that I was real, because back in that room, my family had made me feel like a ghost. 20 flights of stairs. Down, down, down. With every step, the sound of their laughter faded, but the sting of Adrian's words burned hotter. Maybe one day Ember will get a real job. A real job. I stopped on the 10th floor landing, leaning my forehead against the cold, painted cinderblock wall. I closed my eyes, and I saw the last 7 years of my life play out like a bad movie. They told everyone I dropped out of MIT because I couldn't hack it. That was the official family story. Ember is the creative one, my mother would say at dinner parties, waving her hand dismissively. She just didn't have the discipline for engineering. It was too much math for her. It was a lie. A lie I let them tell because I thought it protected the family name. The truth was, I didn't drop out. I was pulled out. 7 years ago, my father's firm, Sterling & Sons, was bleeding money. My father, Richard Sterling, had a reputation for big ideas and terrible execution. He bought materials he couldn't afford. He promised deadlines he couldn't meet. He was a visionary to the public, but a chaotic mess behind the scenes. I was 20 years old, sitting in a lecture hall in Cambridge, Massachusetts, when my mother called me. She wasn't crying. My mother never cried. She was panicked, which was worse. "You need to come home, Ember," she had said. "Your father is in trouble, the books are a mess. The inspectors are threatening to shut down the stadium project. We need someone who understands the numbers but won't talk to the press." I left that night. I packed my dorm room into 3 boxes, withdrew from my classes, and flew back to Chicago. I thought I was coming home for a month. I never went back. When I arrived, the company wasn't just in trouble, it was dying. My father was drinking in his office at noon. Adrian, who had just finished his MBA, was driving a Porsche the company paid for, talking about branding and image, but he couldn't read a blueprint to save his life. Someone had to do the work. So I traded my textbooks for a hard hat. I didn't get a corner office. I didn't even get a desk in the main building. My father put me in the field office, which was a rusty, drafty trailer parked in the mud on the south side of the construction site. "It's better this way," my father told me, not looking me in the eye. "If the investors see a 20-year-old girl running the engineering, they'll pull their funding. You stay back here. You do the work. Adrian will present it. He's the face. You're the support. That's what they called it. For 7 years, I lived in those trailers. I woke up at 4 a.m. every single day. I learned to drink coffee that tasted like battery acid. I learned to talk to union foremen who looked at me like I was a lost little girl, until I pointed out the structural flaws in their pouring schedules that would have cracked the foundation in 5 years. I learned to be invisible. I remember one winter, 3 years into this arrangement. We were working on a high-rise downtown. It was February in Chicago. The wind off the lake felt like knives. The heating in my trailer had broken 3 days prior. But my father said there was no budget to fix it immediately because Adrian needed a new suit for a press conference. I sat there in my parka, wearing fingerless gloves, redrawing the HVAC schematics by hand because the software license had expired and no one paid the bill. My breath puffed in the air in front of me. My fingers were so stiff I could barely hold the pencil. The door banged open. It was Adrian. He walked in, smelling like expensive cologne and warmth. He looked around the trailer with a sneer, like he had stepped in something gross. "Is it done?" he asked. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask why it was freezing. "Almost," I said, my voice shaking from the cold. The load calculations on the west wall were off. I had to recalculate the steel reinforcement. If we had built it the way Dad wanted, the windows would have blown out in the first storm. Adrian grabbed the papers from my desk. "Just give it to me. The investors are waiting at lunch." He turned to leave. "Adrian," I called out. He stopped, hand on the door, letting the freezing wind blow in. "What?" "My heater," I said. "It's been 3 days, I can't feel my toes." He laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Buy a space heater, Ember. Stop being so dramatic. We're all making sacrifices." He walked out and slammed the door. I watched through the dirty window as he got into his heated car and drove away to a lunch that cost more than my monthly rent. I sat there and finished the calculations. I did it because there were 200 workers on that site who needed this job to feed their families. I did it because if the building failed, people would get hurt. I did it because I still, stupidly, loved my father and wanted to save him from ruin. I was the secret engine that kept the Stirling machine running. I fixed safety violations before the inspectors arrived. I renegotiated contracts with suppliers who were ready to sue us. I rewrote the blueprints that my father scribbled on napkins. And every time a project finished, every time a building opened, I stood in the back of the crowd, wearing my work boots, while Adrian and my father cut the ribbon. They praised Adrian for the clean lines and bold engineering. They praised my father for his vision. They never mentioned the girl in the trailer. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was earning my place. I told myself that one day they would call me up to the stage and say, "We couldn't have done it without Ember." I was so naive. I was a workhorse hoping to be treated like a racehorse. But to them, I was just the mule. Useful for carrying the heavy load, but you don't bring a mule to the party. Until tonight. Tonight, the mule had walked into the party. And the mule had finally realized that the heavy load wasn't hers to carry anymore. The moment I truly should have known better, the moment the cracks in my heart really started to show, was 3 years ago, the riverfront disaster. It wasn't a physical disaster, thank God, but it was the moment my soul started to collapse. The riverfront project was supposed to be my father's legacy. A massive complex of luxury condos right on the Chicago River. It was a beautiful idea. It was also a logistical nightmare. My father had bid too low to get the contract. Millions too low. By the time we broke ground, we were already in debt. The banks were calling every day. My mother was selling her jewelry on the quiet to pay the interest on the loans. The stress in the house was thick, like smoke. Then the soil report came back. I was in the trailer as always. The geologist, a man named Miller, threw the file on my desk. "You've got a problem, Ember," he said. "The soil on the north bank is unstable, it's too soft. If you drive piles the way your plans say, the whole north tower is going to sink 3 inches within a year. It'll tear the building apart." My stomach dropped. "How much to fix it?" "You need deeper piles, steel casing, concrete injection. It's going to cost another $2 million and take 3 months. I brought the news to my father. He was in his office, staring out the window, a glass of scotch in his hand. It was 10 a.m. "We don't have the money, Ember," he said, his voice flat. "And we don't have the time. If we delay, the penalty clauses kick in, we lose everything." "Dad," I said, stepping forward, "we can't build on soup, it's dangerous. People will live there." He spun around, his eyes red and wild. "You think I don't know that? Fix it, you're the genius. You always think you're smarter than me. Fix it without spending $2 million. "I can't change physics, Dad." "Then find a way," he screamed. "Or don't bother coming home." He threw his glass against the wall. It shattered. I walked out. I went back to my trailer. I didn't sleep for 4 days. I lived on caffeine and fear. I pulled every favor I had. I called an old professor from MIT, one I hadn't spoken to since I left. I begged him to look at the soil data with me. We worked over Zoom until 4 a.m. Together, we found a solution. It wasn't standard. It was a cantilever system, shifting the weight of the North Tower back onto the solid bedrock of the South Side. It was brilliant. It was elegant. And most importantly, it was cheap. It used steel we already had. I redrew the entire structural plan in 48 hours. My eyes were burning, my hands were cramping, but I did it. I saved the project. I saved the company. I saved the family home. I presented it to the construction team. They looked at me like I was a wizard. "This will work," the foreman said, nodding with respect. "Damn girl, this will actually work." When I brought the plans to my father, he didn't hug me. He didn't cry with relief. He just looked at the papers, grunted, and said, "Good, get it to the site." Then came the opening day. The riverfront plaza was beautiful, glass and steel gleaming in the summer sun. The mayor was there. The press was there. A brass band was playing. I was standing by the catering tent, wearing a simple black dress I had bought at Target. I was tired. My bones felt heavy, but I was proud. I looked at that North Tower standing straight and tall, and I knew I did that. That's my building. Adrian walked up to the podium. He looked like a movie star in a navy suit. He flashed his perfect white teeth at the cameras. "Thank you all for coming," Adrian said, his voice smooth as silk. "When we started this project, we faced impossible challenges. The soil, the budget, the timeline. Many people said it couldn't be done." He paused for dramatic effect. The crowd leaned in. "But I knew we could do it," Adrian said. "I spent many sleepless nights looking at those blueprints. I knew that if we used a cantilever system, we could distribute the load. It was a risk, but leadership is about taking risks." I froze. The air left my lungs. He spent sleepless nights. He looked at the blueprints. Adrian wouldn't know a cantilever from a cantaloupe. My father stepped up to the microphone next. "I am so proud of my son," he said, beaming. "Adrian shows the kind of innovation that Sterling & Sons is built on. He is the future of the city." The crowd applauded. The mayor shook Adrian's hand. They took photos. Flashbulbs popped. I stood there alone by the trash cans behind the tent. A waiter walked by with a tray of empty glasses. He bumped into me. "Excuse me, miss," he said rudely. "You're in the way." I wasn't a person. I was an obstacle. I watched my brother accept an award for innovation in architecture, right there on the stage. He held the plaque high. The plaque I earned. The plaque that belonged to the girl with the shaking hands and the cheap heater in the trailer. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run up onto that stage and tear the microphone out of his hand. I wanted to shout, ask him how deep the piles are, ask him what the load-bearing ratio is. He doesn't know, but I didn't. I stayed silent. Why? Because I was conditioned. I was trained to be the safety net, not the star. I told myself that my sacrifice mattered. I told myself that keeping the family afloat was a noble thing. I was wrong. It wasn't noble. It was pathetic. That day at the riverfront, I learned a lesson, even if I didn't admit it to myself until years later. My family didn't love me. They loved what I could do for them. And the more I did, the less they respected me. I had saved them from bankruptcy, and my reward was to be erased. The morning after the penthouse party, I woke up in my apartment. It wasn't a penthouse. It was a fourth-floor walk-up in a neighborhood where you didn't walk alone at night. The paint was peeling, and the radiator clanked like a dying engine. My head was pounding. Not from alcohol, I hadn't had a drink, but from the sheer emotional exhaustion of being humiliated in front of 200 of Chicago's elite. I sat up and checked my phone. It was blinking with notifications. 17 missed calls, 32 texts. My stomach turned over. I unlocked the screen. The first text was from Adrian, sent at 2 a.m. "Where the hell did you go? You left before the investors left. Unbelievably selfish, Ember. You embarrassed us, again." The next one was from 2:15 a.m. "We need to talk about the Eco Tower. Dad says you have the final CAD files on your laptop. Send them to me, now." Then 3 a.m. "Are you ignoring me? Don't play games, Ember. You're not smart enough to play games with me." I scrolled down. There was a text from my mother. It didn't ask if I was okay. It didn't apologize for Adrian's toast. "Ember, pick up your phone. We need your signature on the transfer documents for the Eco Tower rights. The lawyers are pressuring us. Stop pouting and do your duty." I stared at the screen. Duty. That word again. The Eco Tower. That was the project Adrian had been celebrating last night. My design. My green energy concept. The one I had spent the last 8 months working on while Adrian vacationed in Build. They needed my signature. Legally, because I was the registered engineer on the permit application. Because Adrian didn't have a license. They couldn't move forward with the sale of the building rights without my formal release. They didn't want an apology. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted my ownership. My phone rang in my hand. It was my mother. I stared at the picture of her ID, a photo taken years ago where she actually looked kind. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello?" Finally, her voice was sharp like breaking glass. Where are you? Adrian has been trying to reach you all morning. I'm at home, Mom, I said quietly. I left the party because Adrian humiliated me. Oh, stop it, she snapped. Adrian was making a joke. You have no sense of humor, you're always so sensitive. It's exhausting, Ember. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them away. He called me worthless, Mom, in front of everyone. He said you need a real job, she corrected. And frankly, he's right. Playing around in the dirt is fine for a while, but it's time you grew up, which brings me to why I'm calling. She took a breath and her voice shifted. It became the business voice, the transaction voice. The lawyers are sending over a courier with the papers. You need to sign over the intellectual property rights for the Eco Tower to Sterling and Sons. We're selling the design to a developer in Dubai. It's a huge deal, Ember. Millions? You're selling my design? I asked. Without asking me. It's the company's design, she said coldly. You work for the company, barely. I drew every line, Mom. I did the wind tunnel testing. I sourced the solar glass. And the company paid for the pencils, she said. Sign the papers, Ember. Don't make this difficult. If you don't sign, the deal falls through. And if the deal falls through, we can't pay the mortgage on the penthouse. There it was. The guilt trip. I need time to think, I said. There is no time, she shouted. Adrian is furious. He's already taken steps, Ember. He knew you would be difficult. What do you mean, taken steps? Check your email. The line went dead. I pulled my laptop onto my lap and opened my email. There was a notification from the company HR system, which Adrian managed. Subject, notice of termination. I opened it. My hands were shaking. It wasn't a termination letter for me. It was a CC'd email. Adrian had fired my crew. Bob, the 60-year-old foreman who had taught me how to pour concrete. Sarah, the junior drafter I was mentoring. Miguel, the safety inspector who had a baby on the way. Adrian had fired them all this morning. The email read, due to restructuring and lack of project oversight from the senior engineering team, Ember Sterling, the following positions are redundant effective immediately. He was blaming me. He was firing the only people who respected me, the only people who actually did the work, and he was telling them it was my fault. He was holding them hostage. My phone buzzed again. A text from Adrian. I can hire them back tomorrow, if you sign the papers today. Your choice, little sister. Do you want Bob to lose his pension? Sign the rights over. I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and cracked. I sat there, breathing hard. My chest felt like it was caving in. This wasn't just family dysfunction anymore. This was blackmail. This was war. They didn't care about me. They saw me as a resource to be mined until I was empty and then discarded. And now they were willing to hurt innocent people just to control me. I walked into my tiny bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. I looked pale. I looked like the victim they wanted me to be. No, I whispered to the reflection. I wasn't going to sign, but I wasn't going to just say no either. If I said no, they would just forge my signature or destroy my reputation. I needed to do something they never expected. I walked back to the living room and picked up my cracked phone. I didn't text Adrian back. I didn't call my mother. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into the secure server. I had about an hour before they realized I wasn't complying and locked me out. I needed to download everything. Every email, every draft, every forged safety report Adrian had tried to hide. They wanted my signature, fine. But they were going to get the whole truth along with it. While the files were downloading, I made the mistake of opening social media. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I wanted to see the damage. Maybe I wanted to see if anyone had defended me. I opened Instagram. The first thing on my feed was Adrian's post from the party. It was a photo of the core team, accepting the applause after his toast. I remembered that moment. I had been standing on the far left, looking awkward, holding my water glass. Adrian was in the middle. My parents were on the right, but in the photo on the screen, I wasn't there. The photo had been edited, and not just cropped. Someone had professionally retouched the image to remove me completely. Where I had been standing, there was now just a seamless extension of the velvet curtains and a potted plant. I zoomed in. It was flawless work. It was like I had never existed. I looked at the caption. At Adrian Sterling Arch, visionary leadership requires bold action. Last night we celebrated the future of the Eco Tower. Proud to lead this family and this firm into a new era of excellence. Success is a solo journey sometimes, but the view from the top is worth it. Number architecture, number visionary, number sterling legacy, number self-made, self-made. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat, but it sounded like a sob. Self-made. He couldn't even make his own coffee without calling an assistant. I scrolled through the comments. So inspiring, Adrian. You're a genius, man. The Sterling family never misses. And then, a comment from one of my cousins. Where's Ember? Adrian had replied. Ember couldn't handle the pressure of the big leagues. She's taking some time off to figure herself out. We wish her the best. I stared at the screen until the pixels blurred. It wasn't enough to steal my money. It wasn't enough to steal my work. They had to steal my reality. They were rewriting history in real time. To the world, I wasn't the architect. I wasn't the engineer. I was just the unstable little sister who couldn't handle it. This was the erasure. They were systematically deleting me from my own life. If I disappeared tomorrow, the only record of my time at Sterling and Sons would be a few signed permits buried in city archives. A cold calm washed over me. It replaced the panic. It replaced the sadness. I realized something important. They were erasing me because they were terrified of me. If I was worthless, they wouldn't need to work so hard to hide me. You don't crop a nobody out of a photo. You crop out the person who threatens your spotlight. You crop out the person who actually did the work because their presence proves you are a fraud. They were scared. I looked at the download bar on my laptop. 100% complete. I had it all. The original metadata for the Eco Tower plans, showing my user ID as the creator. The timestamps showing I worked on them for 400 hours while Adrian was in Ibiza. The emails from Adrian asking me to dumb it down so he could understand the presentation. And most importantly, I had the Draft 4 folder. Draft 4 was a version of the Eco Tower plans that I had rejected 2 weeks ago. It was cheaper to build, yes. It used a different alloy for the support beams. But my calculations showed that in high winds, the kind Chicago gets every winter, the stress on the joints would exceed safety limits by 15%. It wouldn't fall down immediately. But in 10 years, it would be a death trap. I had labeled that file, Do Not Use Dangerous, Rejected BY Engineer. I opened the folder on my drive just to double-check. My heart stopped. In the server log, there was recent activity on the Draft 4 file. It had been accessed yesterday by Adrian, and it had been renamed Final Submission Permit PDF. My blood ran cold. They weren't just stealing my design. They were using the rejected cheap version to save money, the dangerous version. And because they needed my signature on the rights transfer, that meant they were probably planning to use my engineering stamp on the permit application too. If that building went up, and if it hurt someone, the investigation would look for the engineer of record. They would find my name, my stamp. They weren't just erasing me, they were setting me up. If the Eco Tower failed, Adrian would say, I just funded it. Ember designed it. Look, her stamp is right there. I would go to prison for negligence. And he would play the grieving brother who had been betrayed by his incompetent sister. I closed my laptop. The snap of the lid sounded like a gunshot in the quiet apartment. I stood up. I went to my closet and took out my good suit. The one I bought for my graduation that my parents didn't attend. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to hide. I picked up the external hard drive with all the evidence. My family thought they had cropped me out of the picture. They thought they had silenced me. But they forgot one thing about architects. We know exactly where the weak points are. And we know exactly how to bring the whole house down. I wasn't going to the office. I wasn't going to my parents' house. I was going to see Zoe Vance, the biggest competitor in the city, the one woman my father was terrified of. The war had started, and I was bringing the ammunition. I stood on the sidewalk in front of the Vance and Associates building. It was a glass tower that looked like a shard of ice cutting into the sky. It was clean, sharp, and intimidating, just like Zoe Vance. My father hated Zoe Vance. He called her a shark and a traitor because she had left his firm 20 years ago to start her own. But I knew the truth. She left because my father stole her work, just like he was stealing mine. For years, she had been the only person in Chicago who could beat us on a bid. And she did it without cutting corners. I checked my reflection in the glass doors. I was wearing my graduation suit, navy blue, sensible, not flashy. My hair was pulled back in a tight bun. I was holding the external hard drive so tight my hand was cramping. I almost turned around. The voice in my head, the one that sounded like my mother, was whispering, You're betraying your family. You're ungrateful. You're going to get laughed out of the building. But then I remembered the photo, the one where they erased me. I remembered Adrian's laugh. I pushed the revolving door and walked in. The lobby was silent and smelled like lemons and steel. The receptionist looked up. She was young, stylish, and efficient. "Can I help you?" "I'm Ember Sterling," I said. My voice didn't shake. "I need to see Zoe Vance." "It's urgent." The receptionist raised an eyebrow. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but tell her I have the structural files for the Eco Tower, and tell her I know why her bid lost." The receptionist hesitated, then picked up the phone. She whispered something, paused, and then looked at me with wide eyes. "Top floor," she said. "She's waiting." The elevator ride took 40 seconds. I counted them. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. When the doors opened, Zoe Vance was standing right there. She was 60 years old, with short silver hair and glasses that hung on a chain around her neck. She wore a black turtleneck and slacks. No jewelry, no nonsense. She looked at me for a long moment. Her eyes were gray and sharp. She didn't smile. "Sterling," she said. "It wasn't a greeting, it was an acknowledgement. You look like your father, but you have your grandmother's eyes." "I'm not here for a family reunion," I said. "I'm here to make a trade." Zoe gestured to her office. It was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. But unlike my father's office, which was full of leather chairs and liquor bottles, Zoe's office was full of work. Drafting tables, models, stacks of blueprints. It was a workshop, not a throne room. I sat down and placed the hard drive on her desk. "My brother fired me this morning," I said, "and they are trying to force me to sign over the rights to the Eco Tower design." Zoe leaned back in her chair. "The Eco Tower, the project Adrian won the Visionary Award for. It's a bold design, Ember. I'll admit, when I saw the concept, I was jealous. I didn't think Adrian had it in him." "He doesn't," I said. "He can't even calculate the load for a parking garage." "I suspected as much," Zoe said. "So why are you here? You want a job." "I want credit," I said. "And I want to stop them." I opened my laptop and connected the drive. This drive contains every iteration of the Eco Tower design, from the first sketch on a napkin to the final CAD file. "Look at the metadata. Look at the timestamps." Zoe put on her glasses and leaned in. She scrolled through the files. She was fast. She clicked on the structural analysis, the wind resistance models, the material specs. She was silent for 10 minutes. The only sound was the clicking of the mouse and the hum of the air conditioner. Finally, she stopped. She looked up at me and her expression had changed. The sharpness was gone, replaced by something else. "Respect. The cantilever solution at the riverfront," she said softly. "That was you." "Yes." "The retrofit on the stadium roof last year, the tension cables." "Yes." "And this," she pointed to the screen. "The variable density glass for the Eco Tower to reduce thermal gain. This is brilliant, Ember. This is doctoral-level engineering." "I learned by doing," I said. "I lived in trailers for 7 years fixing their mistakes." Zoe took off her glasses. "I always wondered how Richard kept that company afloat. He's a drunk and a gambler. And Adrian is a salesman. I knew someone else was doing the math. I just didn't realize it was his daughter." She stood up and walked to the window. "You know what they say about me, right?" she asked. "That I'm cold, that I'm ruthless." "I don't care," I said. "I just want to work for someone who knows my name." Zoe turned around. "I don't just want to hire you, Ember. I want to partner with you. You have a mind for structure that I haven't seen in 20 years. You see the skeleton of the building, not just the skin. That's rare." She walked back to the desk and extended her hand. "Senior structural engineer," she said. "And 5% equity in the firm to start. Plus, we put your name on every project you touch. Big letters, no cropping." I looked at her hand. It was a lifeline. "There's one more thing," I said, not taking her hand yet. "I think they're going to build the Eco Tower using a rejected draft. A dangerous one. I need help proving it." Zoe's eyes narrowed. "If they do that, people will die." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm here." Zoe nodded grimly. "Then let's get to work. Welcome to the team, Ember." I shook her hand. It was firm and warm. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just a helper. I was a partner. The first week at Vance and Associates was a shock. I had my own office. It had a door that closed. It had heat. I had a high-performance computer and a chair that didn't hurt my back. But the biggest shock was the culture. On Tuesday, I was in a meeting with the junior architects. I pointed out a potential drainage issue in a plaza design. I expected them to roll their eyes or tell me to be quiet like Adrian would have. Instead, the lead architect, a man named David, stopped writing. "Wait, explain that," he said. I explained it. "She's right," David said to the group. "Good catch, Ember, thank you. Thank you." 2 words I hadn't heard in 7 years. I went back to my office and closed the door because I felt like crying. It was pathetic how much I starved for basic decency. But I couldn't relax. I had a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I kept checking the City of Chicago Department of Buildings portal. It was a public website where you could track permit applications. I knew my family was desperate. The groundbreaking ceremony for the Eco Tower was scheduled for Friday. That meant they needed the full construction permit approved by Wednesday today. I sat at my desk at 8 p.m. The office was mostly empty, just the cleaning crew moving around in the hallway. The blue light of the monitor lit up my face. I hit refresh on the portal. Application number B-2025-8892. Sterling & Sons Eco Tower. Status, approved. My heart stopped. Approved. That meant they had submitted the final structural drawings and a licensed engineer had stamped them. But I hadn't stamped them. And I was the only licensed structural engineer of record on the project. Adrian wasn't licensed. My father's license had been suspended pending a review of his continuing education credits. Another mess I used to clean up for him. So how did they get approval? I clicked on the View Documents tab. The file downloaded slowly. My internet connection was fast, but time seemed to slow down. The PDF opened. I scrolled past the cover sheet. Past the zoning compliance. I went straight to the structural schematics. I looked at the beam specifications on page 42. Beam type, W12x26 grade 50 steel, I gasped. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." W12x26 was the spec from draft 4, the cheap draft, the rejected draft. The safe spec, the one I had finalized in draft 8, was W14x90. It was much heavier, much stronger, and much more expensive. Using the lighter steel saved them about $4 million in materials, but it reduced the wind load capacity by 35%. In a Chicago winter with high winds off the lake, those beams would twist. The glass would pop out. The floors would buckle. It was a disaster waiting to happen. I scrolled to the bottom right corner of the page. The signature block. There was the stamp. Ember Sterling, PE license number 98-2000, 214 State of Illinois, and across the stamp, a signature in blue ink. Ember Sterling. It looked exactly like my signature. The loop on the E, the sharp cross on the T. I touched the screen. It was a forgery, a perfect digital forgery. Adrian must have taken my signature from an old PDF, isolated it in Photoshop, and pasted it onto this dangerous document. I felt sick, physically sick. I grabbed the trash can under my desk and dry heaved. This wasn't just theft anymore. This was a crime, a felony. They were framing me. If when that tower failed, the investigators would pull these plans. They would see the cheap steel. They would see my stamp. They would see my signature. They would say I was incompetent. They would say I signed off on a death trap to save money. Adrian and my father would claim ignorance. "We just build what the engineer tells us," they would say. "We trusted Ember. We had no idea she cut corners." They were willing to send me to prison to protect their bank account. They were willing to risk the lives of hundreds of future tenants just to get this project built. My own family. The people I cooked Thanksgiving dinner for. The people I sacrificed my education for. I sat back in my chair, trembling. The fear was gone. It was replaced by a cold, hard rage. It was a feeling I had never let myself feel before. I picked up my phone and dialed Zoe's personal number. She answered on the first ring. "Zoe," I said. My voice sounded strange, flat, metallic. "Ember, what is it? It's late." "They did it," I said. "They submitted draft 4, the dangerous one, and they forged my signature." Silence on the other end. Then the sound of movement, keys jingling. "Stay there," Zoe said. "I'm calling a friend of mine. His name is Inspector Davis. He's the head of the Structural Safety Board. Don't touch anything. Don't close the browser. I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Zoe," I said. "They're going to try to bury me." "No, Ember," Zoe said firmly. "They just dug their own grave. We're just going to push them in." Inspector Davis was a large man with hands that looked like they could crush a brick. He wore a rumpled trench coat and looked tired, but his eyes were alert. He stood behind my desk, looking at the screen. Zoe stood next to him. "You're sure this is a forgery?" Davis asked. His voice was gravelly. I'm sure, I said. I never signed draft 4. I specifically labeled it rejected in our internal server. Look. I pulled up my evidence, the hard drive I had brought with me. I showed them the file history. See here, I pointed. Created October 12th. Marked dangerous October 14th. I ran a simulation on this draft. It failed at wind speeds of 60 miles per hour. 60, Davis scowled. We get gusts of 80 in the loop. Exactly, I said. Here is the email I sent to my brother explaining why we couldn't use this steel, and here is his reply. I opened the email. From Adrian Sterling to Ember Sterling subject. RE costs, you're overthinking it, Ember. The safety margins are too high. We need to cut costs or the investors walk. Find a way to make the cheaper steel work. Stop being a coward. Davis read the email and grunted. Stop being a coward, nice guy. He didn't care about the physics, I said. He only cared about the margin. Davis turned to Zoe. This is serious, Zoe. If they break ground on Friday based on these plans, it's criminal negligence. Fraud, forgery. We need to stop them, Zoe said. But we need to do it publicly. If we just file a complaint quietly, Richard will pull strings. He has friends in the zoning office. He'll claim it was a clerical error, withdraw the plans, and submit new ones later. He'll escape. I don't want him to escape, I said. Both of them looked at me. I want everyone to see it, I said. I want the investors to see it. I want the city to see it. They tried to destroy my reputation. I want to destroy their lie. What do you have in mind? Davis asked. The groundbreaking ceremony, I said. Friday morning, everyone will be there, the press. The investors, the mayor. You want to crash the party? Zoe asked, a small smile appearing on her face. I want to bring the truth to the party, I said, but I need more proof. A simulation isn't enough for the layperson. We need to show them exactly what will happen. We spent the next 2 days in the war room of Zoe's office. I worked with Zoe's best 3D modelers. We took the specifications from the forged permit, the weak steel, the insufficient concrete, and we built a digital twin of the eco tower. Then we ran the physics engine. On the big screen, the tower stood tall. Then we introduced the wind load. At 40 mph, the tower swayed. At 50 mph, the windows on the 20th floor shattered. At 65 mph, the primary support beam on the southwest corner buckled. The sound from the speakers was a sickening crack. Then, the progressive collapse began. Floor pan falling onto floor pan. The whole structure twisting and coming down like a house of cards. It's a tomb, Davis said quietly, watching the screen. That building is a tomb. And here is the overlay, I said. I clicked a button. The screen split. On the left was the collapse. On the right was the forged signature. They signed my name to a death sentence, I said. Thursday night, my phone rang. It was my mother again. I put it on speaker so Zoe could hear. Ember, my mother's voice was sweet. Sickeningly sweet. We haven't heard from you, we're worried. I'm busy, Mom, I said. Well, I just wanted to remind you about the groundbreaking tomorrow. It would look very bad if you weren't there. People are asking questions. I thought Adrian said I was taking time off, I said. Oh, you know Adrian, she laughed lightly. He's just stressed. Come tomorrow, wear something nice. We're going to announce the new partnership with Dubai. It's a celebration. I'll be there, I said. Good, she said. And Ember, bring your notary stamp. There might be a few last-minute forms. I looked at Zoe. She shook her head in disbelief. I'll bring everything I have, I said. Perfect. See you at 10 a.m. Don't be late, she hung up. She has no idea, Zoe said. She thinks she still controls you. She thinks I'm the same Ember, I said. She thinks I'm the girl who just wants to be loved. I stood up and looked at the simulation on the screen, frozen at the moment of collapse. She's about to meet the engineer. Friday morning was cold and bright. The kind of Chicago morning where the sky is a hard, brilliant blue. The construction site for the Eco Tower was decorated with flags and banners. A large stage had been built over the mud. A white tent was filled with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I arrived in a black SUV with Zoe and Inspector Davis. We parked around the corner. I watched through the tinted window. There was my father, shaking hands with the bankers. He looked flushed and happy. There was my mother, wearing a white fur coat, directing the photographers. There was Adrian, standing center stage, checking his reflection in his phone. He looked so confident, so untouchable. Are you ready? Davis asked. He was wearing his official city inspector uniform now, badge visible. Behind our car were 2 police cruisers. I'm ready, I said. We got out of the car. The ceremony had already started. Adrian was at the microphone. And this tower represents not just a building, but a promise, Adrian was saying. A promise of safety, of sustainability, of family values. The crowd clapped politely. We have worked tirelessly, Adrian continued. My father and I have poured our souls into these blueprints. I walked onto the site. Zoe was on my left, Davis on my right. The police officers followed behind us. The crowd near the back noticed us first. A murmur went through the group. People turned their heads. The applause died down. Adrian squinted against the sun. He saw me. Ah, he said, his smile faltering for a second. And here is my sister, Ember. Running a little late, as usual. He laughed nervously. Come up here, Ember, join the family. I didn't smile, I didn't wave, I kept walking. I walked right down the center aisle. The investors in their expensive suits parted ways for us. I walked up the stairs to the stage. Ember, what are you doing? My mother hissed, stepping forward. Who are these people? This is Inspector Davis, I said, my voice amplified by the microphone as I stepped close to it. Adrian tried to grab the mic. Okay, thank you, Ember. We can discuss this later. Inspector Davis stepped between us. He was a foot taller than Adrian. Step back, Mr. Sterling. The crowd went deadly silent. What is the meaning of this? My father demanded, blustering forward. This is a private event. This is a crime scene, Davis said. His voice boomed across the site. The cameras were all flashing now. Every lens was pointed at us. Crime scene, Adrian laughed, but it sounded like a choke. That's ridiculous, we have permits. You have forged permits, I said. I looked at the crowd. I looked directly at the investors. My name is Ember Sterling, I said clearly. I am the structural engineer for this firm. The permits that were submitted to the city on Wednesday bear my signature and my stamp. I paused. But I did not sign them. Gasps from the crowd. The plans submitted utilize substandard steel, I continued. Beam W12X26. If this building is built as designed by my brother, it will collapse within 5 years. She's lying, Adrian screamed. He looked wild now. She's crazy, she's jealous because I fired her. I have the proof, I said calmly. I held up the hard drive. And so does the City Department of Buildings. We have the metadata proving the forgery. We have the emails where you demanded cheaper materials against safety regulations. Zoe stepped forward. I have personally reviewed the files. As a licensed architect in the state of Illinois, I certify that the plans Adrian Sterling submitted are a catastrophic failure waiting to happen. The investors were backing away. The bankers were on their phones. This is slander, my father shouted. I'll sue you, I'll sue all of you. You can't sue, Davis said. You're under arrest. The police officers stepped onto the stage. Richard Sterling, Adrian Sterling, Davis said. You are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and reckless endangerment. The color drained from Adrian's face. He looked at me, his eyes wide with shock. He looked like a child. Ember, he pleaded. Ember, tell them it's a mistake, we're family. I looked at him. I looked at the brother who had mocked me, the brother who had erased me from the photo, the brother who had stolen my life for 7 years. Family doesn't build their fortune on their sister's grave, I said. The officers handcuffed him. Adrian dropped the ceremonial golden shovel. It hit the wooden stage with a hollow thud. My mother was screaming. Don't touch him. Do you know who we are? Yes, I said to her. We know exactly who you are, and now so does everyone else. I turned my back on them. I walked down the stairs. Zoe put a hand on my shoulder. You did good, she said. I looked back one last time. Adrian was being led into the police car. My father was arguing with an officer, his face purple. My mother was standing alone on the stage, looking around, realizing that no one was looking at her with envy anymore. They were looking at her with pity. Their empire didn't crumble slowly. It imploded, just like the building in my simulation. And I was the one who pushed the button. The fallout lasted for 6 months. It was messy. It was loud. It was everywhere. The Sterling scandal was on the news every night for weeks. The investigation revealed everything. Not just the Eco Tower, but years of financial fraud. My father had been cooking the books for a decade. Adrian had been bribing inspectors on other jobs I hadn't managed. They lost everything. The bank seized the penthouse. The company was dissolved. My father lost his architecture license permanently. He avoided prison due to health reasons. But he was a broken man, living in a small rented condo in the suburbs, disgraced and forgotten. Adrian wasn't so lucky. Because he had forged the signature, a direct felony, And because the intent was to defraud investors, the judge wasn't lenient. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. I didn't go to the sentencing. I read about it in the paper while sitting in my new office. My mother tried to call me once, about 2 months after the arrest. I was at my desk at Vance and Sterling. Yes, Zoe had changed the name of the firm. I saw my mother's number on the caller ID. I hesitated. Part of me, the old part, the little girl part, wanted to answer, wanted to hear her say she was sorry. But I knew she wouldn't. She would ask for money, she would blame me. She would say I ruined the family. I realized I didn't need her apology, and I didn't need her permission to be happy. I pressed the block caller button. I turned my chair to face the window. From my office on the 40th floor, I could see the whole city. The lake was a sheet of silver. The trains moved like toys below. And 3 blocks away, I could see the cranes rising. The Meridian Spire, my project. It wasn't the Eco Tower. The investors from that project had pulled out of the deal with my father, obviously. But they had come to Zoe and me. They asked us to design something new on the same site. I designed a building that was honest. It was all exposed steel and clear glass. It didn't hide its structure, it celebrated it. It was strong. It was flexible. It could bend in the wind without breaking, just like me. I picked up my notary stamp from my desk. I had ordered a new one. Ember Sterling, partner Vance and Sterling Architects. I took a piece of paper. I pressed the stamp down firmly. Thump. It left a perfect, crisp blue mark. I wasn't the hidden workhorse anymore. I wasn't the victim. I wasn't the uneducated sister. I was the architect. I looked at the cranes lifting a massive steel beam into the sky. I took a sip of my coffee. It didn't taste like battery acid. It tasted like victory. I didn't bury my family. I simply stopped holding them up, and without me to carry them, they fell. But I was still standing, and I was just getting started.